Quick note before we start the video, be sure to check my ultimate survival guide where I go over more tips to give you a head start on the game. So tip number 1 is starting off with the best phobies. Now everyone starts off with the same 5 phobies: Razor Mouth, Gravedigger, Murderwing, Sheeping Gas, and Jar Cannon. However, once you are halfway through the tutorial, you are given a free pack that will contain a random but limited selection of phobies you'll start the game with. Here's the list of all the phobies you can possibly obtain from this pack. All the phobies sharing the same key cost are selected at random, except for the 6 key cost phobie Erratic. Unbearables, Stairmaster, Primate, and Hevo are unique and that they come in pairs respectively. This means that you either get Unbearable and Stairmaster or Primate and Hevo. The 1 key cost phobies don't matter too much on which one you get, however I'd say Cowboy is a little bit better than Contortio. The 2 key cost phobies come in pairs, so you'll get any 2 of the 4 presented. I'd say Eternal Night is the weakest of the 4 and Cassowary is the strongest one. So I recommend trying to roll for Cassowary and K9000 or Gesundheit and K9000. Note that you cannot get both Cassowary and Gesundheit. Next we have the 3 cost phobies, Bomangles and Stabby. Either of these phobies are good, however if you want an easier time I'd recommend trying to get Stabby due to its passive ability, which reflects 30% of the damage dealt to it by other phobies. Next you'll either get Unbearable and Stairmaster or Primate and Hevo. I would go for trying to get Hevo and Primate as Hevo stays relevant throughout your whole time playing phobies, while Unbearable will fall off due to being introduced to many phobies that inflict the poison status effect. Stairmaster is a little weak due to its low health stat, making it easy to deal with, while Primate is average, being a lesser version of Cassowary. Finally, you have the 7 key cost phobies, which are either Fish Tank and Alligator. Now either one is fine, but Alligator stays more relevant as you progress through the game, so try to get Alligator. However, he's not a must-have. Here's the phobies I would recommend pulling if you want a higher win rate and an easier time in the game. If you're unhappy with the phobies you get, you can always go to the settings and delete your account and redo the tutorial. However, I wouldn't recommend doing this if you already made some progress on your account. Tip number 2 is making sure you're utilizing your 1 key cost phobies to the max. One of the many mistakes I see new players do is not utilizing their 1 key cost phobies. They'll usually just capture 1 panic point and then throw it away to die. Here's a couple of things you can use your 1 key cost for: recapturing panic points, dealing the final blow to dimensionals, body blocking for your range units, and stepping on resurrection phobies. Another tip you can do that only works on maps without healing spots is hitting a jar cannon if your opponent happens to overextend. Due to the lack of healing phobies at the start of the game, the jar cannon will be low enough health that you can snipe it with your own jar cannon or any other range unit. Tip number 3 is properly positioning. When positioning, you need to keep in mind 5 key things: what phobies your opponent has, their range, their damage, the health of your phobie, and if your other phobies are in position to retaliate. You can tell a phobie's range by clicking on them, and any tiles highlighted in red means that the phobie can target those tiles either from the position they're in or moving and then attacking. When positioning, keep these questions in consideration. How many phobies can target my phobie? Do the phobies in range deal enough damage to destroy my phobie? Are my other phobies lined up for a counterattack? If so, can I come out on top in this exchange? These are a few ways to determine if your positioning is good. If you have trouble calculating damage from numerous phobies, I found it's easier to round up the numbers. This will get easier as you get familiar with all the different phobies, their damage values, and abilities. Tip number 4 is understanding danger zones. I refer to danger zones as tiles on the map that your opponent can summon a phobie and have it reach that tile to deal bonus damage. Danger zones are close to your opponent's spawn point, and each map has a different danger zone. Basically, when pushing, never push into your opponent's spawn. Let's take a look as to why. As you can see, we overextended and our opponent managed to destroy us in that exchange because we stepped into his danger zone, and he was able to capitalize on that by summoning phobies that can move and target our phobies right away. There are instances in which you can overextend and be fine, but I will go over that in a more in-depth video. Tip number 5 is understanding counters and certain interactions you'll face as a new player. I'm only going over the interactions that new players will commonly face, If you're having trouble with Erratic, consider using Sheeping Gas special ability on it. Your Sheeping Gas will more than likely die, but since Erratic is undead, it cannot be cured of the poison status effect. The Erratic will lose about 500 HP every turn. Meanwhile, you move your phobies far enough that the Erratic can't target them, but not too far that you give up your map pressure. Once it's around 1000 health or so, you can jump Erratic and deal with it no problem. Jar Cannon might also be annoying with new players to deal with, however it has quite a few counters. Keep in mind that if there's a huge level difference, these counters won't work. Cassowary will always destroy an equal level Jar Cannon. Murdering's ability will destroy a Jar Cannon up to 2 levels above it. Flamingos will always destroy a Jar Cannon equal to its level. Eternal Knight will destroy a Jar Cannon up to 1 level higher. And finally, Jar Cannons of equal level will destroy the other in 2 shots. Tip number 6 is always spawning something at the start. Sometimes new players will skip their first turn to get out a 7 cost or 6 cost phobie. Don't do this. You'll leave yourself vulnerable to getting panic point rush and lose out on early map pressure, which if your opponent is experienced enough will use that to their advantage and snowball the game in their favor. Instead, if you're going first, depending on the map, I recommend either starting off with 1 key cost phobie or 2 1 key cost phobies, or even a Bomangos or Stabby, whichever one you have. A lot of the time, if you're going second, you're going to be forced to play defensively and proactive. There's a couple of ways you can start off going second, and like I keep repeating, it really depends on the map. I recommend either starting off with 2 1 key cost phobies, a Stabby / Bomangos and a 1 key cost phobie, or a Cassowary and a 1 key cost phobie. Feel free to experiment on what phobies work as a starter. Don't be afraid to try different strategies. That's how you get better at the game. Tip number 7 is saving up your keys. A lot of the times I'll see new players just spawn phobies for the sake of using their keys. Only spawn what you need and try to spawn counters to your opponent phobies. This is especially true for maps with only 3 panic points. As long as you control at least 1 panic point, your heart will only receive around 200 damage. Use your heart health as a resource and save up to summon phobies that are better than your opponents. However, don't get carried away and lose all the map pressure, causing your opponent to snowball and win the game. There is a balance and you will get better at identifying when you should save keys versus when you should spawn more phobies. Tip number 8 I have is always check your opponent's phobie levels. Remember how we talked about counters? Well, those counters only work if phobies are similar enough in level. Unfortunately, due to the game's progressions, you may find yourself at a point where you are severely outmatched in terms of phobie levels. This will result in situations in which normally your phobie wouldn't die, but it does due to the opponent's levels outscaling yours. Tip number 9 is using ranged units more often. For the most part, you want your army to have a mix of melee and ranged units, but mostly ranged units. This is due to melee units having to go in front lines, so they're more susceptible to being in range of your opponent's phobies and dying. Tip number 10 is making sure you attack with your undead phobies first. Due to their built-in lifesteal, you want to make sure they deal their max damage output so that they maximize their healing.
That feels like a breakthrough.
That's going to do it for today's videos, guys. I hope you learned something today and that these tips get your win rate up. Again, check out my beginner's guide, which I will link in the description for more tips.